So I think I know he's gonna be also based in South Dakota, or excuse me, North Dakota, or
Just
North
go
Dakota,
on,
Wisconsin.
portal community. Yeah, according to
I think I had it all figured out where he's gonna be.
smart ass.
Is there any family left in
Or I
this?
will try not to.
Oh, I don't know, I think he's got some friends that.
Oh.
But I
Bob
don't
and
know
Bruce
that he-
were both from there, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. But he visits resolution numbers even. I don't think he visits.
Yeah,
I
we're
don't know.
gonna put the numbers on since there was more than one.
There was on the interstate, there was a gasoline transport, said Gina transport miles, and that was some relative. That's not-
I don't, we would have to ask and see if Judy knows. Yeah,
Well, at least I know that in 2012 it was.
that's what they said.
7 more minutes.
Totally got an announcement like, if you new job,
Oh, yeah?
That's where they should.
their rental housing is just screwed. And he's got a city council that I'm there that's goofy.
I suppose
That's my small town call.
he's probably waiting for it to rain.
Some lobbies.
I don't know where they think people are gonna, housing just be there. It's gotta be everybody's
Just, yeah, people just don't understand.
They don't get it, so.
Well, good morning. It is 9 o'clock. We'll call a meeting to order. A current copy of the Open Meetings Act of Nebraska is posted on the wall at the back of the council chambers. Let's first start with roll call.
Wilkie,
Here?
Stepka,
Here.
Lucas. Here. Patterson. Here. Burley.
Here.
Okay. Next item is to approve the minutes of the May 13th, 2022. You'll receive that by email.
I move to approve.
Roll call?
Wilkie,
Yes.
Stepka,
Yes.
Lucas. Yes. Patterson. Yes. Burley.
Yes.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is to review development plan and cost-benefit analysis for the Defco Housing Redevelopment Project. And that resolution is 20-22 that you have in front of you. Comments, Mr. Bacon?
Mr. Chair and members of the authority, Mike Bacon, Gothenburg, Nebraska, prepared the proposed redevelopment plan pursuant to the application filed by Devco. Last night, there was a public hearing in front of the Planning Commission, and they unanimously voted to make a recommendation to you and the City Council to approve the plan. There were major comments were not in my backyard, a little bit, it's unfair, and they wanted more parks. And there was a concern about traffic. The recommendation of the planning staff was to approve the plan because it fits in a blighted and substandard area, and this will require rezoning, right? But that is contemplated in the plan. This property is owned by the city of North Platte, unless Devco or the Chamber and the development company can purchase the property from the city. This plan will collapse because they can't obtain title to it. If they do obtain title to it and it is ultimately approved, then the project could move forward, but that's one area that it could be stopped. Second area that could be stopped if you don't make no recommendation or withhold your recommendation to the City Council, it stops. And third, it would stop if the City Council decides they don't want to approve the plan. This plan contemplates a redevelopment contract that would provide for annual increments over a period of time. If you only build on 5 lots rather than start 51 lots running on the 15 years, you only start the TIF running for those lots that are developed, like we've done before on the Lonnie Parsons project. So I'll let Gary respond to why here and that sort of thing. But if you have any questions on the technicalities or anything like that, let me know. I would tell you, because there was some testimony in the past that TIF is not appropriate for housing, I go back far enough to have been around when there were senators that were around when TIF was in fact adopted right out of the gate. And testimony in front of committees way back then was TIF was adopted for housing and not for commercial, at least in the opinion of some of the senators back then. So it has always been targeted at housing. You find very little testimony in the early days of the TIF process for commercial and industrial. All of it was for, the testimony was towards housing. Any questions from any of the members of the chair?
I have a quick question just on the residential layout. So that, there won't be any problems with the city setbacks for once the houses are placed there. I mean, I assume the lots are large enough to comply with that.
I think Judy would be the one that can respond to that and the size of the lots and so forth.
Yes, the way it's laid out right now, most of the lots are at least 66 foot wide. That's usually where we run into trouble, is the width of a lot. That's average lot size. We do have lots that are as small as 44 foot in other areas. That gets a little bit of a struggle to get them in there, but 66 foot wide to build what they are proposing should be an easy fit, yep.
We did visit with a number of realtors to get their take on it, and they said, please nothing under 65. So that's why we went that direction.
No, I was just looking at the dimensions just to make sure.
Gary, do you want to add any comments, or Mr. Bacon?
Any other questions? Good question.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to answer any question. I think it's very well known that the housing inventory is at a historic low. We hear that every day, from real estate agents as well as job seekers who would like to come to town, employers who want to employ people, who have hired people, can't find housing. We've met with a number of developers who are they're frustrated with the political process and the time consumption and the risk factor and everything that goes into that. But they said if the city would put the infrastructure in, or if they'll approve redevelopment plan with TIF, and then somebody would put the lots in, they want to do what they do best, and that's build housing. So our organization has worked diligently ever since the Shot in the Arm program to try to spur on housing development here, because it simply was not happening. And it's helped to some degree, but it hasn't been a cure-all either. And Brandon Jones, who's our board chairman, finally got to the point, he says, I'm sick and tired of spending half our meetings every month talking about housing. He said, we're either going to do something or we're going to quit talking about it. So a committee formed, and they looked at the housing study, of course, and the housing study showed more distressed housing on the north side of the community than any other location. So they thought, if we're going to do something and we're going to try to get a redevelopment plan passed, perhaps the political climate would be more accepting to help an area of the community that is documented, has some stress in different neighborhoods, and this would help revitalize new energy into it. So we've researched all of the areas that were potentially vacant to where this could be constructed. This one kept coming back to the surface. Number one, the city owns it, so you're dealing with somebody who also understands the great need for housing. The comprehensive plan of 2012 that was adopted by the Planning Commission, recommended by the Planning Commission, adopted by the City Council, designated this area for housing, and it was already blighted. So you're already saving 4 months going through a blight process and getting a study done and not losing the entire construction season. We know the demand is here already, and that's not even contemplating what's headed our direction. And we have a wonderful opportunity to grow North Platte, but it will not happen without housing. And we've got to be as aggressive as we can be from A to Z in every type of housing that can be accepted into North Platte. I did some research to just point out to you kind of a direct correlation of where some of our peer communities, the trade center communities of similar size to North Platte, county seat towns, and other areas of the state, and you see a comparison from 1980 when North Platte was ranked number 1 in population of those 7 communities. Today we rank number 7. And then you look at the direct correlation to how those communities have been aggressive using tax increment financing to help build their communities, to help build their housing inventory, their commercial and industrial. And the number of projects pale in comparison to the active projects. You got a high of Kearney doing as many as, they have 41 active TIF projects right now. North Platte has 7 that's still going forward on the project. Pales in comparison. You look at the amount of valuation of those TIF projects. Again, we're very, very far behind the curve compared to other communities. Fremont's high with like $170 million worth of TIF projects on the books. We have 14 million right now. Obviously, sustainable beef hasn't come forward yet to the point that they're considered to be an active TIF project. You also see then the population growth of those communities and what percentage of a community is actually, how does their TIF valuation that's separated from the actual valuation of the community, what percentage does that represent? And again, North Platte is way under the amount of percentage that the other communities are. So I thought that was rather startling, but it also correlates exactly how if you use this redevelopment tool in a correct manner, it can really help grow your community. So that's the reason, and every developer we talk to, they're very challenged to try to get infrastructure in now at a cost-effective basis to where it will match up with the housing cost to where you're targeting that working family that can afford the affordability factor. Now, if you get above 375 to 400, up into that, the developers will look at maybe putting some infrastructure in, but even today's costs, I mean, Mr. Bacon was telling me over in Gothenburg, they recently put a subdivision together, got cost estimates on putting it in place. It was going to be $100,000 to put a lot in. By the time you put the sewer, the water, the streets, buy the land, and it's overwhelming. And yet everybody has this great housing challengers. Developers can go anywhere in the state of Nebraska. They can go anywhere in the Midwest and build. We have to try to recruit them, entice them here. And the more developer-friendly in housing a community is going to be, the more success they're going to have. And so the challenge is daunting, and it's not that we aspire as a development and Chamber of Commerce to do this, but we're just not seeing the private sector developer willing to step up. But we are seeing their willingness, if they can have available lots, to do what they do best, and that's build housing. And we're negotiating with several of them right now. We still haven't found, we don't have an agreement in place, but we're trying to target that 250,000 and under, all possible. Right now, the best proposal we have on the table is around 270,000, and that's if we can make the lot all at a very nominal cost. We're just trying to break even on this deal, the best we can. If a developer looked at our pro forma, they would walk away in a heartbeat because they said there's no money into it. How could we possibly do this? Besides, take the risk of trying to develop it over time. So we may wind up having 2, 3, 4 different housing developers involved in this particular project, unless somebody can step forward and prove to us they can get it done in a systematic fashion, in a timely fashion, and at the cost that we think needs to be there. So especially at this particular location. So happy to go into other details. I just don't want to over elaborate further. So thank you.
Gary, is this all R1?
Now, it is right now, obviously, just ag, isn't it?
It's ag.
Because it's been vacant for a long time. And if you need to address the cemetery issue, which was a pretty prevalent theme last night, people concerned that this was designated for cemetery property. But the city has assured us that with the current funeral practices and everything, they're good for another 100 years without using this particular location. It's just on the very northern part of what the city-owned property is, and then going back to what the Planning Commission and the City Council back in 2012 designated this for future housing. So and then you blight it. That's an invitation for developers to come forward and do what they've asked them to do. And so that's what's brought us to this point. And I think that was not understood well by some of the people who came forward last night and expressed a concern. The city would still have to decide. They'll sell us the property to make this happen, and they'd have to approve the redevelopment plan, because it cannot happen without it.
Well, I guess my question was, if possible, to have any duplexes on those?
Yeah, we're requesting R2 zoning,
Okay.
as similar to what the Dancer Properties did over on Dixie and Phillip Avenue. It gives you more flexibility, so you could potentially have townhomes where you have, both sides of the home being occupied on a split lot. So that adds some flexibility to it for us, and it's compatible with some of the neighborhoods around here. There are two, obviously, the Dancer Properties project, which you see going forward every day when you drive down Phillip Avenue. It's worked for them very well, but yeah, that's what we are requesting is R2.
Thank you.
Questions, discussion? Oh, Mr. Bacon?
The action, should you wish to move forward, would be for the adoption of the resolution that's been prepared.
Well, I think it's a great project, and I certainly commend the board for putting all the hard work into it, and I hope it goes through. And with that, if there's no other questions, I would move we adopt resolution number 20-22.
I would second that.
Move to second.
I think it's 2022-2.
2022-2? Okay, I'll amend that motion.
Any other discussion? Call the question? Roll call?
Wilkie?
Yes.
Stefano?
Yes.
Lucas?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Brulea?
Yes.
Okay. Next item here is review the redevelopment plan and cost-benefit analysis for the amended redevelopment plan for a portion of Twin Rivers Industrial Park.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, this is a slightly different project than you've seen in the past. Gary will explain some of the challenges with the industrial park, but it's a nice piece of property that was picked up when the Walmart distribution center went in. And they've had a lot of recent activity, but they are hamstrung without further infrastructure installation. And it is a daunting task financially to put that in. But they're seeking tax increment financing as the projects develop going forward so that they can put in street, sewer, and water. There is a proposed layout in terms of additional lots that can be developed there, but that it's proposed only, and that is because Gary will have people come and tell him what size the lot for their particular development, so that's not cast in stone yet. But there is a large area that they will attempt to capture tax increment financing. They're going to go out and borrow money to put in infrastructure and hope that they can be repaid through the development of the lot. So this one is going to be a project where They will take the eligible developments that go in out there and ask for an amended redevelopment contract as each one goes in to capture TIF for 15 years on that, to repay the bond and to pay for the infrastructure. So all of the eligible buildings that would go in that area, they would be subject to TIF to help pay for the street, sewer, and water. The project is also designed so that they don't have to go borrow the whole shtick right away. If they get one project in that'll run the street so far or the infrastructure so far, they can do it a little bit at a time. So this project will be in front of you for a number of years until they can get the infrastructure in. With the launch of Sustainable Beef and other projects that you've got going, hopefully that'll be a very short period of time. Have any technical questions on that? Be glad to answer them.
Mr. Bacon, how long is that period that that window will be open?
That will be set in the redevelopment contract, and I've not prepared a proposed one, so that's open to discussion with them.
It's going to be the entire area that the chamber owns, right? I mean, whatever's left, right?
Yeah, there's a portion of it on the west edge that is not in a blight zone. So those projects that go there would not be able to be recaptured, but they'll obviously benefit from the fact the infrastructure gets
Yeah.
in place.
Yeah, so this, going the right direction. So the property that's to the west is a non-blight area, but the infrastructure will go right along there and benefit that so that they can have access to it, but we can only capture, in this area. And was that part of the family farm? Yeah, so Judy's well acquainted with this piece. So.
Where the pivot was put on there. Right. Okay.
Any
I
other
understand.
questions? I'll let Gary explain the necessity for the project.
The last 2 years, we've had 13 new industrial commercial buildings built out there. And with only one street in, you just got ingress, egress on one street. So it's almost become a safety issue now too. Some of the new warehouse obviously going to have additional truck traffic in there as well. So that's something we knew long-term that needed to get addressed eventually once you could justify it. And so with the success we've had over the last couple of years, that time is now. In fact, it's probably behind time that we should have probably looked at this. So we need to, you have one north-south Twin River Road existing now. We need to build an east-west connecting road and then have a parallel north-south road over a distance away from where Twin Rivers Road is. The other issue is for the community to have what's called a community-controlled business park. If it's mandatory, if you're going to be a certified economic development community in the state of Nebraska. It's also mandatory for the Nebraska Department of Economic Development, sometimes brokers and sometimes even utility providers like MPPD to have your community compete for requests for proposal they get from industries. A lot of times that's a blind lead from a third-party broker that we don't know who they are, what they are, until we start getting into the weeds on it. They'll say, here's a parameter, here's our needs, what do you have that can accommodate this in an expeditious fashion? They're not going to wait around. There's too many other options that other communities have for them to consider to wait around for a year and a half to get all this in process, to get the utilities bid out, to get the land purchased, to get the zoning right. And so that's another reason that it's very, very important that something like a Twin Rivers Business Park exists. When we get those RFPs, we can put a good enough proposal together, we get a chance for a site visit, then we make sure that they're aware of every other potential site in North Platte exists, to give them options, but at least gets our foot in the door with those companies. And it just, they don't want, when you have these people that are looking for potential locations, they don't want to deal with 30 different landowners out there trying to figure it out. They want one that the community can control and can dictate what the terms are. So that's what existed in the first place. North Platte would have not been the governor's economic development community of the year in 2021 had we not had the Twin Rivers Business Park. Same theory we're trying to do with Industrial Rail Park. You know, you build it, you hope they will come. And it's been a time coming for Twin Rivers Business Park, but that time has arrived. And now with Sustainable Beat, the Industrial Rail Park, there's going to be a lot of ancillary businesses also looking at North Platte. We want to capture those here if we can. You know, that's a lot of new investment. K&M Tire just opened out there, prime example, company that needed to make a decision within 30 days and start going forward. Had we not had a shovel-ready park, that wouldn't have happened. They'd have been in some other community. But now they put a long-term investment that's going to be here for a long, long time. Very nice 50,000 square foot warehouse building, and they're going to build a twin building beside it there as they build their trade area servicing tire dealers all throughout this region. So that's in a nutshell why. And we recently had a company looking out there. We lost to another community in Nebraska, largely because they didn't have the patience to wait, and they would have been larger than the K&M project out there. So it just drives home the point that now's the time.
Other discussion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution 2022-3.
Second.
Second. Moved and seconded. There's just any more discussion? Let's vote. Roll call.
Wilkie?
Yes.
Stelka?
Yes.
Lucas?
Yes.
Patterson? Yes. Briliot?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. The next item here is, we discussed this and tabled it last meeting, but consider granting the chair authority to move forward redevelopment plan submittals to the North Platte Planning Commission for public hearing and recommendations without formal action by the CRA membership vote. And I think the mayor's intent is to speed up the process. And from talking with Mr. Bacon after the last meeting, there are some things statutorily that it requires. That first meeting is not a statutory requirement. It's more of a North Platte, way it was developed in North Platte, if I understand correctly. And so this meeting that we have and the next one are statutory requirement meetings, but the mayor is looking for a way to possibly speed up the process. And we were talking about communication and information flow last time. And so open it up for discussion and consideration.
I think the important point to follow with that is that P.D. Clark, the entire department submittal reviewed in the city before we even looked at those projects, and they've had a lot of time and effort spent on them. So I think there's been a lot of effort and work put into them and to entice or help move the projects along. I think the preliminary meeting, if it's not mandatory or statutory, I think it should be discontinued. The second part of that is also when they announce that and go to this planning commission, one of the discussions last time involved the media being informed, and the notices that are required to go to planning commission does make that media information available to the public prior to that meeting.
You know, one of and I heard a little bit from third party of what your discussion was the last meeting about this. And I think that, and I understand the Open Meetings Act slows everything down. If we don't have to do it, that's probably better. But it seems to me that if, I think anything we can can do to speed it up is a good idea. But one of the things that I thought about that maybe might be a check is for the chair to at least inform the vice chair, which it wouldn't be a violation, whether it's by email or otherwise. Hey, I got this project I'm gonna submit to the planning commission, I just wanna let you know. So that the vice chair is aware, or if it's the vice chair because of the chair's absence, they inform each other. I think I'd feel comfortable with that. As long as, and I know it puts a burden on the chair. Our board itself is gonna hear about it if the planning commission moves forward with it at that stage, and if there's any concerns about it at that time. But I think just for some feedback from the CRA and to avoid that open meetings, I think that would probably be a better way to handle it. If the vice chair and the chair are willing to do so, you know. I don't think it would slow it down.
Mr. Chair and members, if you're willing to go down this path, I would make the following recommendation. One, that an application be reviewed by the planning department, legal department, and the chair for completeness. Once that's done, a copy of that go to all members with the saying that here is the full plan and that I intend to forward this under the authority of the CRA to the Planning Commission for hearing, unless any member of the board requests that we have a public meeting in advance, and that at the same time that goes out to all of you, it goes out to all of the newspapers and radio and television folks. So that is a check. That communication is valid and has been blessed by the Nebraska Supreme Court. What you can't do is hit reply all. Hey, I want to have a meeting. What you can do is communicate to the chair that I want this to be, I want to have a properly noticed CRA meeting. And so as the process goes, if it comes to you, you are not required to take any action. TIF is a matter of grace and not a matter of right. So if something comes in, you can say no, and it stops. Well, it can go to the Planning Commission and come back to you, and you can say no, and it stops. So you have several checkpoints. The City Council can approve the plan, but that doesn't mean you have to implement the plan. You can stop it again. So you have several off-ramps if you cannot get to a place that you are comfortable that's in the best interests of the community. So that would be my recommendation if you wish to speed up the process.
And that email is gonna have to have, from the chair, is gonna have to have a disclaimer that says, don't discuss.
Yeah. That's not a discussion. That is request for a meeting. Yeah, yes.
And I'd be comfortable with that too, but I do think that there's gonna have to be a pattern language that we put in that email that says, this is what we're doing. And certainly, let me know by the end of 5 o'clock today if you wanna hear it, you know, as opposed to give me a week.
You're the, which one, you're the vice chair now?
I think
think
I am,
Rob is.
yes.
You're the vice chair, okay. Then I'm agreeable with that too, so you want me to go ahead and make a motion?
I still think it would be important to have, to have the understanding that only the vice chair can discuss with the chair about the merits, and the rest of it's just a notice saying, here, want a hearing? Say, I want a hearing, otherwise, for your information only. So,
So there could be discussion between the chair and vice chair without any implications of open meetings.
That's
But-
because there isn't, you're not a majority of those five, so, yeah. I mean, not to delay it, but just if there wasn't, but.
Okay, so I make motion to consider granting the chair authority to forward the redevelopment plan submittals to the North Platte Planning Commission for public hearing and recommendations without formal action by the CRA membership vote.
Unless specifically requested by one of the CRA members, right? Is that,
Is there
I'll second.
a second? Further discussion? Okay, let's vote. Roll call?
Okay,
Yes?
Stefka,
Yes.
Lucas,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Bruyette.
Yes.
Okay. Any other business this morning?
And you're willing to do that, I take it?
I am.
Okay. I didn't see a resignation or anything out there.
Well, we'll see how hot this gets here. The seat gets hot, you know. So, all right. Anything else? Other business? All right. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Do you,